The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the third time in 50 rotations. Ambassador Zethkar of the Velkari Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes as he entered the massive crystalline chamber that floated in the void between galaxies. The sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. 12 of the 47 council seats were empty. Not absent. Empty. Permanently. The holographic displays showed the devastation in stark, clinical detail. Entire star systems reduced to debris fields. Planets cracked open like eggs. Space stations twisted into metal sculptures that defied physics. The hegemony of Kral, then, masters of biological warfare for 3 millennia, had been wiped out in 6 days. The synthetic collective, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago, simply ceased to exist overnight. "The humans," wheezed Chancellor Morden through his breathing apparatus, "have been contained?" Military Commander Vexashaw, her 4 arms trembling with barely controlled rage, slammed her fists on the council table. "Contained? Contained? Do you understand what they did to the siege fleet of Andromac? They turned our own weapons against us. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were torn apart by modified mining equipment." Zethkar had seen the footage. Human vessels that looked like they were held together with hope and metal scraps, somehow outmaneuvering craft that had been designed by civilizations older than their solar system. But it wasn't just the ships that terrified him. It was what the humans did afterward. They didn't just destroy their enemies. They studied them. Adapted their technology. Within weeks of first contact, human ships were incorporating quantum drives that had taken the Talnari species 3,000 years to perfect. They reverse-engineered plasma weapons during active combat. Most disturbing of all, they learned to think like each species they fought against, then use that understanding to predict and counter their strategies. "The reports from Kepler Station," Zethkar said quietly. "Are they confirmed?" The chamber fell silent. Kepler Station had been the Galactic Council's most secure research facility, hidden in a pocket dimension accessible only through gates that required the combined authorization of 7 species. The humans had found it. Somehow. "They didn't destroy it," Mordoun admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "They took it, along with everything inside. 40,000 years of accumulated knowledge, weapons designs, ship blueprints, genetic templates. They have it all." Vexisha's mandibles clicked nervously. But that's not the worst part. The facility's AI sent one final transmission before communications were cut. The humans weren't pillaging randomly. They knew exactly what they were looking for. They had a list. The implications settled over the council like a suffocating blanket. The humans had been planning this. But planning for how long? And how could a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 of their years ago possibly know about classified Galactic Council archives? "There's something else?" said Dr. Kesselan, the Council's chief xenobiologist. Her usually pristine feathers were ruffled with stress. "Our analysis of human combat footage reveals something unprecedented. They're not just adapting our technology, they're improving it, exponentially." She activated a holographic display showing side-by-side comparisons. "This is a Velkari plasma cannon, refined over 6 centuries to achieve maximum efficiency. This is the same weapon after 1 week in human hands. They've increased its power output by 40% while reducing energy consumption by 30%. "Impossible," Zethkar muttered. "The plasma matrices alone would require—" "They reconfigured the entire weapon," Kesselan interrupted. "Not just improved it, completely reimagined how it works. And they did it while under fire during a space battle. Our weapons engineers are calling it beyond impossible. It violates everything we know about technological progression." The central display changed to show a tactical map of the local galactic arm. Red zones marked areas where human presence had been detected. The pattern was spreading like a virus, but it wasn't random expansion. The humans were systematically targeting specific systems, specific facilities, specific technologies. They're building something, Mordoon realized with growing horror. All these raids, all this destruction, they're not conquering territory. They're gathering resources for something bigger. Commander Vexishaw pulled up classified military reports. Intelligence suggests they've established massive construction facilities in the void sectors. Areas so remote our long-range sensors can barely detect them. Whatever they're building out there, it's big enough to show up on gravitational sensors from 3 star systems away. "How many of them are there?" asked Counselor Draven, speaking for the first time since the session began. Surely their homeworld can't support a population large enough to threaten the entire galactic community. Kesselon's feathers drooped further. "That's another problem. We still don't know where Earth is." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Species that communicated through color changes flashed rapid sequences of alarm. Others released pheromone clouds of disbelief. "What do you mean you don't know?" Vexishaw demanded. "We've been fighting them for 2 rotations. Every human ship we've captured self-destructs before we can extract navigation data," Kesselon explained. "Every prisoner we've taken has had their memory centers surgically altered to remove any knowledge of their homeworld's location. Even their genetic markers have been deliberately scrambled to prevent us from tracing their evolutionary origins." Zethkar felt his heart skip a beat. "They're covering their tracks. These aren't random raiders or explorers. This is an organized military campaign with operational security that surpasses our own." "It gets worse," Dr. Kesselan continued. "Psychological analysis of human prisoners reveals something disturbing. They're not afraid. Every other species we've encountered shows some form of fear response when faced with overwhelming force. Humans don't. They show curiosity. They want to understand how our weapons work so they can build better ones." The holographic display shifted to show recorded interrogation footage. Human prisoners, clearly outmatched and captured, calmly answering questions while their eyes tracked every piece of technology in the room. They weren't looking for escape routes. They were studying their captors. "Look at their eye movement patterns," Kesselon pointed out. "They're memorizing the room layout, analyzing the molecular structure of the walls, calculating the power requirements of our devices. Even in captivity, they're gathering intelligence." "Have any of them broken under interrogation?" Morden asked. "That's just it," Kesselon replied. "They talk freely, too freely. They volunteer information about human culture, their history, their philosophy. But nothing about their military capabilities, their home system, or their plans. It's like they want us to know enough about them to be terrified, but not enough to fight back effectively." The session was interrupted by an urgent communique. The massive structure hanging in space defied every principle of engineering that the Galactic Council had developed over millions of years. It stretched across 40 kilometers of void, a twisted amalgamation of technologies from dozens of species. Velkari quantum cores pulsed alongside crawl-then bio-neural networks. Synthetic collective energy conduits fed power to weapons systems that incorporated elements from every major civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Kuntar's flagship, the Eternal Glory, maintained a cautious distance of 1 million kilometers. Even from here, his sensors were having difficulty getting accurate readings. Whatever materials the humans had used to construct their ship seemed to absorb or deflect most scanning attempts. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we're receiving a transmission." "From the human vessel?" "No, sir, from everywhere." Kuntar frowned. "Clarify." "The signal is being broadcast simultaneously from the human ship, but it's also coming from relay stations throughout our territory. Somehow they've tapped into our communication network." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what appeared to be a spacious bridge. The architecture was clearly human, but it incorporated design elements that Kuntar recognized from ships that had been destroyed months ago. How had they acquired detailed structural plans of vessels they'd never captured intact? A human stepped into view. Unlike the prisoners they'd interrogated, this one wasn't wearing standard military attire. Instead, she wore a simple dark uniform with no visible rank insignia. Her hair was gray, suggesting advanced age by human standards, but her eyes held an intelligence that made Kuntar's skin crawl. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez," she began, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "I represent the Earth Defense Consortium. You know us, though perhaps not as well as you think you do." Kuntar activated his own transmission systems. "This is Admiral Kuntar of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet. You are in violation of 17 interstellar treaties and are wanted for the destruction of—" "Admiral," Vasquez interrupted calmly, "we need to talk, but not about treaties, about survival." The human's directness caught him off guard. "Survival? Yours, specifically. You see, the Galactic Council has made a critical error in judgment. When you opened the gate to Earth, you assumed you were dealing with a primitive species that could be easily conquered or intimidated. You were wrong on several counts." Behind Vasquez, other humans moved efficiently around the bridge. Kuntar noticed that they operated their stations with an economy of movement that suggested extensive training. These weren't desperate refugees or raiders. They were professional military personnel. "First," Vasquez continued, "you assumed Earth was our homeworld. It isn't. Earth is our cradle, the place where humanity began. But we've been among the stars far longer than you realize." The Admiral felt his confidence wavering. "That's impossible. Our deep space sensors would have detected—" "Your sensors detect what we allow them to detect," Vasquez said with a slight smile. "For the past 2 centuries, we've been observing your civilization, learning your languages, studying your technologies. When you finally made contact with Earth, we already knew everything about you. You knew nothing about us." Kuntar's tactical officer whispered urgently in his ear. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting additional contacts. 12 more vessels, various sizes, approaching from different vectors." "Second," Vasquez continued, apparently aware of the developing situation, "you assumed that the resistance you encountered represented the full extent of human military capability. The ships you've been fighting, the weapons you've been analyzing, the tactics you've been studying, those were training exercises, stress tests. We needed to understand how you think, how you fight, how you adapt to changing circumstances." The main display split to show the approaching vessels. Each one was unique, incorporating different technological approaches. Some were sleek and appeared to be built for speed. Others were massive, bristling with weapons that Kuntar didn't recognize. All of them were moving in perfect coordination, despite their varied designs. "You've been testing us," Kuntar said, the implications slowly sinking in. "For 2 years," Vasquez confirmed. "Every engagement, every skirmish, every raid on your facilities has provided us with invaluable data about galactic military doctrine. We now know the combat capabilities, weaknesses, and tactical preferences of every major species in the Council." Kuntar's communications officer reported in. "Sir, we're receiving surrender demands from the Council chambers. Multiple species are requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations." "Third," Vasquez said, apparently monitoring their communications, "you assumed that humanity operates according to the same social and political structures as your own species. You expected us to have a homeworld government that could be threatened, civilian populations that could be held hostage, critical infrastructure that could be destroyed to force compliance." The human captain gestured, and the display behind her changed to show a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light appeared, scattered throughout the spiral arms. "Humanity doesn't have a homeworld anymore, Admiral. We have thousands of worlds. We don't have a central government. We have autonomous colonies that cooperate when necessary and act independently when beneficial. You can't threaten us with planetary bombardment because we're everywhere. You can't cut off our supply lines because we're self-sufficient. You can't force us to surrender because we have no central authority empowered to make that decision." Kuntar studied the star map with growing horror. The lights weren't randomly distributed. They formed a pattern, a network that encompassed nearly a quarter of the galaxy. Humanity hadn't just been observing the Galactic Council. They'd been surrounding it. "How long?" he asked quietly. "We've been preparing for this moment for 300 years, Vasquez replied. "Not for conquest, for contact. We hoped that when we finally revealed ourselves, it would be as equals seeking peaceful coexistence. Your species chose differently." The Admiral's sensor operator called out in alarm. "Sir, the human vessels are powering weapon systems. Energy signatures are off the charts." "Don't worry," Vasquez said, apparently hearing the report. "We're not here to destroy your fleet. We're here to deliver a message to the Galactic Council, a demonstration of what happens when Earth is threatened." The space around Kuntar's fleet suddenly erupted with activity. The 12 approaching human vessels disappeared, moving faster than his sensors could track. When they reappeared moments later, they were in perfect formation around his ships. "Impossible," his navigator whispered. "Nothing can move that fast in normal space." "Your understanding of physics is limited by your technology," Vasquez explained. "We've had 3 centuries to study the universe without interference from galactic politics or restrictive treaties. We've made certain discoveries that your council would find disturbing." One of the human vessels fired a single shot. The energy beam passed harmlessly through the shields of Kuntar's flagship, through the armor plating, through the internal bulkheads, and struck a specific console on the bridge. The tactical display exploded in a shower of sparks, but no other systems were affected. "Precision targeting through active shielding," Vasquez noted conversationally. "We can hit any system on any ship in your fleet without affecting anything else. Your armor, your shields, your defensive technologies, we've studied them all. We know how to circumvent them." Kuntar's crew stared at their instruments in shock. According to every reading they could take, the human weapon had passed through solid matter as if it wasn't there. "What do you want?" Kuntar asked, his voice hoarse with strain. "To deliver a message," Vasquez replied. "When the Galactic Council authorized the opening of the gate to Earth, 12 billion humans died in the subsequent invasion. 12 billion people who had never heard of your civilization, never threatened your territories, never interfered with your politics. They died because you decided that humanity was a threat that needed to be eliminated." The captain's expression hardened. "Every one of those deaths has been recorded. Every name has been cataloged. Every family has been notified. The Galactic Council will answer for what it has done." "We fought back," Kuntar protested. "Your species was expanding too rapidly. The projections showed." "The projections were wrong," Vasquez cut him off. "Humanity had no intention of challenging galactic authority. We were content to remain in our corner of the galaxy, developing our civilization in peace. You destroyed that possibility." The human ships around Kuntar's fleet began to move again, this time in a complex pattern that seemed to serve no tactical purpose. Then he realized what they were doing. They were spelling out words in galactic standard, their positions forming letters that could be read from the bridge of his flagship. "We remember," the ship spelled out in the void. "The war is over, Admiral," Vasquez announced. "Humanity has won. But we're not interested in ruling a galaxy. We're interested in justice. The Council will be dissolved. The species responsible for opening the gate to Earth will face trial. The survivors will be allowed to govern themselves, provided they never again threaten worlds that pose no danger to them." Kuntar's communications officer reported that they were receiving similar broadcasts throughout Council space. Human fleets were appearing at every major population center, every military installation, every government facility. The coordination required for such an operation was staggering. The council chambers felt smaller now, despite their vast crystalline walls that had once symbolized the unity and power of 47 spacefaring civilizations. Only 31 species remained, their representatives huddled around a table that seemed too large for the diminished assembly. Ambassador Zethkar watched the holographic display showing the current state of galactic affairs. Red zones marked areas under human control. Yellow zones indicated regions where negotiations were ongoing. The few remaining green zones, representing unchanged council territory, looked like isolated islands in an ocean of transformation. The hegemony of Kral, then, has agreed to the reparations package, reported diplomatic coordinator Lesheva. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen an empire crumble in a matter of weeks. Complete technological disclosure, supervised disarmament of biological weapons programs, and exile for their leadership to designated monitoring stations. "What about the Velkari Empire?" asked Chancellor Mordun. "Conditional surrender. They're demanding representation in the new galactic authority that humanity is establishing." Lesheva's tendrils writhed with nervous energy. The humans agreed, provided they submit to complete technological and military oversight. Zethkar found the human approach to victory deeply unsettling. Rather than the expected conquest and subjugation, they were implementing what they called transitional justice. War criminals were being tried by tribunals that included representatives from their own species. Conquered territories were being governed by interim authorities drawn from local populations. Military assets were being confiscated, but civilian infrastructure was being improved. "The reports from Kepler Station," Dr. Kesselan said quietly, "are they accurate?" Military Commander Vexashaw activated a secure display. "Confirmed. The humans have rebuilt the entire facility, but instead of using it as a weapons research center, they've converted it into a medical facility. They're using our own genetic manipulation technology to treat diseases that have plagued our species for millennia." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the chamber. The humans had stolen their most classified military research and were using it to heal their former enemies. "They've also released all the data," Vexashaw continued. "Every scientific discovery, every technological advancement, every piece of knowledge that was restricted to Council archives. It's all been made freely available to every species in the galaxy." Zethkar studied the data streams flowing across his personal display. Faster-than-light communication protocols that would revolutionize interstellar commerce. Medical treatments that could extend the lifespan of most species by centuries. Agricultural techniques that could eliminate hunger on resource-poor worlds. Technologies that the Council had hoarded for political advantage were being distributed without restriction. "Why?" Chancellor Mordun asked the question that haunted them all. "They could rule the galaxy. They have the military strength, the technological superiority, the strategic positioning. Why are they giving away their advantages?" The chamber fell silent as they contemplated the human strategy. Every species represented in the Council had histories of conquest and subjugation. When one civilization gained decisive advantage over others, the pattern was always the same: expansion, exploitation, dominance. The humans were breaking every rule of galactic politics. A new presence materialized in the chamber. Captain Elena Vasquez stepped through a dimensional portal, her arrival unannounced and unexpected. The fact that she could bypass every security system in the Council chambers demonstrated humanity's technological supremacy more clearly than any weapon could have. "Honored representatives," she said with a slight bow. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "We didn't agree to anything," Vexisha growled, her four hands moving instinctively toward weapons that had been confiscated weeks ago. "Of course not," Vasquez replied calmly. "But you're here, and you're listening. That's progress." Zethkar activated his diplomatic protocols, assuming the role of primary negotiator. "Captain Vasquez, your species has achieved a decisive victory. What are your terms for permanent peace?" "That's the wrong question, Ambassador," Vasquez said. taking a seat that materialized beneath her. The right question is, what are your terms? The council representatives exchanged confused glances. This wasn't how conquering civilizations typically behaved. I don't understand, Zethkar admitted. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, Vasquez explained. We never wanted that. What we want is to ensure that what happened to Earth never happens to any other world. We want to create a system where species can develop according to their own nature without fear of preemptive strike from neighbors who feel threatened by their progress. Dr. Kesselan leaned forward. But the military demonstrations, the technological superiority, the coordinated strikes against our infrastructure were necessary to stop the killing, Vasquez finished. Every day the war continued, more people died. On both sides, we ended it as quickly and decisively as possible to minimize casualties. Chancellor Mordoon's breathing apparatus wheezed as he struggled to understand. But your demands for technology transfers, the war crimes tribunals, the monitoring stations are temporary measures, Vasquez clarified. The tribunals will conclude their work within 5 years. The monitoring stations will be closed once we're confident that biological and quantum weapons programs have been permanently dismantled. The technology transfers are intended to level the playing field so that no single species can threaten others with overwhelming force. Zethkar accessed his personal database, reviewing everything they knew about human psychology and social organization. You're trying to eliminate the conditions that lead to warfare. Exactly, Vasquez smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Humanity spent centuries learning this lesson on Earth. Wars happen when one group feels threatened by another's capabilities, or when resources become scarce, or when communication breaks down between different cultures. We're addressing all 3 factors. The human captain activated a holographic display showing the proposed new galactic structure. Instead of the centralized authority that the Council had maintained, she outlined a network of autonomous regions connected by trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Every species gets to govern itself according to its own values and traditions, Vasquez explained. But any species that threatens others faces immediate intervention from a collective security force. Resources are shared based on need rather than political influence. And mandatory cultural exchange programs ensure that everyone understands their neighbors well enough to avoid conflicts based on misunderstanding. What about humanity's role in this new system? Vexesha asked suspiciously. We'll participate as equals, Vasquez replied. No special status, no veto powers, no permanent leadership positions. The only difference is that we'll maintain responsibility for the collective security force until other species develop comparable capabilities. Dr. Kesselan's feathers ruffled with confusion. But you could dominate this system. Your technology, your military strength. Power shared is power multiplied, Vasquez said. Humanity learned that lesson too. When we were confined to Earth, we spent enormous resources fighting among ourselves. When we began working together, we achieved things that would have been impossible for any single nation or culture. The captain stood, and her chair dissolved back into energy patterns. The choice is yours, honored representatives. You can accept the new reality and help build something better than what came before, or you can continue fighting a war that's already over. What happens if we refuse? Mordoon asked. Vasquez's expression remained neutral. Then you'll continue to be governed by emergency measures until you change your minds. But understand this. Humanity has already won. We're not offering you terms of surrender. We're offering you partnership in creating a galaxy where 12 billion people don't die because their neighbors fear their potential. The captain moved toward the portal that would transport her away from the chamber. Take your time to decide. We've waited 300 years to have this conversation. We can wait a little longer for you to make the right choice. As the portal closed behind her, the council representatives sat in stunned silence. Outside the crystalline walls, human ships maintained their positions throughout galactic space, not as occupying forces, but as guardians of a peace that hadn't existed since before any of their species had achieved spaceflight. "The humans," Zethkar said finally, "are not like us." "No," Dr. Kesselan agreed, her voice filled with something that might have been hope. "They're not." The vote, when it came, was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, former enemies would work together to build something new, something better, something that honored the 12 billion dead by ensuring their sacrifice would prevent future tragedies. The gate to Earth had been opened in violence and fear, but what came through might just save them all. "How many ships do you have?" Kuntar asked. "Enough," Vasquez replied. "The question isn't how many ships we have, Admiral. The question is what happens next. Your people have a choice. Accept the new reality and work toward a peaceful future, or continue fighting a war that ended the moment you decided to attack Earth." The massive human command ship began to turn away, its escort vessels falling into formation around it. "Admiral Kuntar," Vasquez said as her image began to fade from the screen, "I suggest you contact the Council chambers. Tell them that humanity is prepared to discuss terms, but make sure they understand one thing clearly." The transmission ended, but the final message appeared in text on Kuntar's screen, translated into every language used by the Galactic Council. "We opened the gate to Earth. Now we have to live with what came through. Tion." A holographic figure materialized in the center of the chamber. Admiral Kuntar of the Border Defense Fleet looked haggard, his usually immaculate uniform torn and scorched. "Council members," he began without preamble, "we have a situation. Long-range sensors have detected something approaching from the rim. It's big, bigger than anything in our databases." The main display shifted to show sensor readings. A massive object was moving through space at impossible speeds, too large to be a ship, but too organized to be a natural phenomenon. "What are we looking at?" Vexisha asked. "Unknown, but it's heading directly for Council space. Estimated arrival in 72 standard hours." Zethkar studied the readings with growing dread. The object's energy signature was unlike anything they'd encountered, but there were familiar patterns embedded within it, technologies they'd seen before, but modified beyond recognition. "Council members," he said slowly, "I believe the humans have just announced their arrival.